Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. A desperate call for help, then the Deathworlders deployed their deadliest fleet. Taiwan paced nervously in the grand chamber of the Manan High Council. The holographic display surrounding him painted a grim picture. Red markers representing CAAC forces spread like a disease across the star map of Maran territory. Each passing day brought news of another fallen colony, another overwhelmed defense fleet. The Maran Confederacy, with its 5,000 years of peaceful existence, faced extinction within months. Ambassador, the council has assembled, announced his aide, a slender Moran with pale blue skin that had lost its healthy luster from weeks of stress. Tyan straightened his formal robes and entered the circular chamber where 12 representatives from the Confederacy's core worlds waited, their faces showing varying degrees of fear and desperation. Esteemed council members, Taiwan began, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil, the CACI advance continues unabated. Our latest projections show they will reach the core worlds within 60 days. Our military forces report ammunition shortages, and 3 more defense fleets were lost yesterday. Elder Nima, the eldest counselor, raised a trembling hand. Is there truly no hope? Have we tried negotiating with the CAAC again? They return our communications with the same message each time, Toden replied. Complete surrender followed by resource extraction rights to all our worlds. Those who resist are eliminated, those who surrender become labor forces. The chamber fell silent. The Maran species had evolved as gatherers and builders, not warriors. Their neural chemistry was wired for cooperation, not conflict. Their military existed primarily as a peacekeeping force, until the CAX arrived 6 months ago. There is one option we haven't fully considered, Taiwan said finally. The humans. The mere mention sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. Councillor Perry, representative of the Scientific Coalition, stood up. The Deathworlders, Ambassador. You cannot be serious. Their planet alone would kill most of us within hours. High gravity, toxic atmosphere, extreme temperature variations, dangerous radiation levels, and apex predators everywhere. The being such a world produces cannot be trusted. Yet our initial diplomatic missions found them to be complex, Toden countered. Yes, they have an unsettling comfort with violence and conflict, but they also show remarkable compassion and a strong ethical framework. Their history is filled with war, but also with healing and rescue. Elder Nima looked troubled. Are we certain they would help us rather than take advantage of our weakness? What do we truly know about them? Taiwan activated his personal data pad, projecting images of Earth and humans. They are physically robust, as expected from a high-gravity world. Their bodies can withstand radiation levels that would kill most sentient species. Their cellular structure repairs itself at rates we find difficult to believe. They require sleep, but can go without it for days when necessary. They consume both plants and animals. Omnivores, whispered Councillor Party with a shudder. What truly makes them unique, Dan continued, is their psychological makeup. They evolved on a planet where disaster could strike at any moment, earthquakes, floods, predator attacks, disease outbreaks. Those who survived weren't necessarily the strongest individuals, but the groups that helped each other. This created beings with both aggressive capabilities and deep cooperative instincts. Councillor Ren, the military advisor, spoke up. Can they actually help us? The CAAC outnumber and outgun us. Even if the humans joined our cause, what difference would it make? The humans have kept most of their military capabilities classified, Taiwan admitted, but our intelligence suggests they have significant spacefaring combat experience from conflicts in their own system. They've developed technologies specifically designed for their harsh world that might prove effective against the CAX. The debate raged for hours. Some councillors feared the humans would simply replace the CAC as conquerors. Others worried that involving Earth would only make the CX more determined to eradicate them. A few believed the risk was worth taking. As the discussion continued without resolution, Toden made his decision. He slipped away from the council chamber and returned to his private office. There, he activated the special communication array installed after first contact with Earth 3 years ago. "This is Ambassador Taiwan of the Miran Confederacy," he spoke clearly into the transmitter. "I formally request emergency assistance from Earth under Section S of our diplomatic accord. The CRYX Dominion has breached our defenses and threatens all Moran worlds. We face extinction and request immediate military aid." He ended the transmission and sat back, wondering if he had just saved his people or delivered them to a different predator. 3 days later, Taiwan's private communicator chimed. A human diplomatic vessel had arrived at the outer marker of the Marin home system, requesting permission to approach. The Council still hadn't reached a formal decision on contacting Earth. "What have you done, Ambassador?" Elder Nima asked when Tawan confessed to sending the message. "I've given us a chance," he replied simply. The human vessel docked at the central diplomatic station orbiting the Moran home world. Taiwan led a small delegation to meet them, his heart's beating rapidly in his chest. The airlock cycled open to reveal 5 humans, 3 females and 2 males by their appearance. They wore simple blue uniforms without obvious weapons, though Taiwan knew their bodies were weapons in themselves compared to the fragile Moran physiology. "Ambassador Taiwan," the lead human said with a slight bow. "Admiral Kim Suanai of Earth Fleet Command. These are my strategic advisors." Taiwan returned the bow. "Thank you for responding so quickly to our call, Admiral. The situation has only worsened since I sent my message." "We came as soon as we received your transmission," Admiral Kim said. Her face remained neutral, but Taiwan noticed the slight tension in her posture that suggested readiness for action. They proceeded to the emergency command center where the full council had assembled, along with the remaining Moran military leadership. The holographic displays now showed even more CX-controlled territory. For 2 hours, the Moran military commander detailed their dire situation: defense fleets destroyed, colonial worlds under occupation, refugee ships overwhelmed, supply lines cut. Throughout the presentation, the humans remained silent, occasionally exchanging glances or making notes on their data devices. When the briefing ended, Elder Nima addressed the human delegation formally. "Admiral Kim, now that you understand our situation, we must ask, can Earth provide meaningful assistance against this threat?" The humans exchanged looks. Admiral Kim stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room before she spoke. "The CAX tactics and technology are familiar to us. We faced similar aggression in our own system's history." She paused, then continued with calm certainty in her voice. "We'll handle it." "Handle it?" Counselor Perry repeated incredulously. "Admiral, perhaps the translation matrix has failed. The CAC have destroyed half our territory with a fleet of over 200 warships." "What exactly do you mean by, handle it?" Admiral Kim's expression didn't change. "I mean exactly what I said, Counselor. Earth will respond to your call for help. We have already mobilized our emergency response fleet. The first ships will arrive within 48 hours. The rest will follow within the week." Tan felt a mixture of relief and dread. The humans were coming. Whatever happened next would change the Moran Confederacy forever. Commander June stood on the observation deck of the Moran defense platform, his eyes fixed on the empty space where the human fleet was scheduled to appear. Behind him, a dozen Moran officers waited nervously, their blue skin tinted with stress patterns. The atmosphere was thick with hope and fear. "How many ships did they promise?" asked Sub-Commander Lee, June's most trusted advisor. Admiral Kim mentioned 75 vessels in the first wave, June replied, checking the time display again. "They should be here any moment." As if responding to his words, space itself seemed to ripple. Brilliant points of light appeared, growing larger as the human ships emerged from hyperspace. June leaned forward expectantly, waiting to see the fearsome warships that might save his people. What appeared instead left him speechless. The vessels emerging into normal space looked nothing like warships. They were an odd collection of shapes and sizes, lacking the uniform design and obvious weapons arrays of military craft. Some were bulky with large cargo sections, others were sleek but clearly designed for speed rather than combat. Several appeared to be converted civilian vessels with minimal modifications. "There must be a mistake," Lee whispered. "These aren't warships." The largest vessel in the human fleet, a massive cylindrical ship with multiple extending arms, moved toward the Moran defense platform. Its communication array activated, and Admiral Joe's face appeared on the main screen. "Greetings, Commander June. Earth's Emergency Response Fleet reporting as promised. Request permission to establish joint command operations on your platform." June struggled to maintain his diplomatic composure. "Admiral Joe, we are grateful for Earth's response, but there seems to be a misunderstanding. We were expecting military vessels." A small smile appeared on the human admiral's face. "There's no misunderstanding, Commander. These are precisely the ships we intend to use." Within an hour, Admiral Joe and her command staff had boarded the Moran platform. The Marin officers gathered in the main briefing room, their confusion and disappointment poorly concealed. Maps of the advancing CX forces dominated the display screens, showing enemy positions that were now only days away from the remaining Moran core worlds. Jiho stood before them in a simple gray uniform without decorations or rank insignia. Her calm demeanor seemed at odds with the crisis at hand. "I understand your concerns," she began, gesturing toward the fleet visible through the viewing ports. "You expected warships with heavy weapons. Instead, we've brought what might appear to be an inadequate response." "For us, Admiral," Commander June said carefully, "the Kriaks have destroyed our best military vessels. They have disintegration cannons and gravity torpedoes. How can mining ships and medical transports possibly stand against them?" Jiho nodded. "Let me explain what you're seeing out there. The large vessel with the extending arms is the Earth ship Mercy. It's designed to respond to planetary earthquakes, with the ability to stabilize crumbling structures and extract survivors from collapsed buildings. Its gravity anchors can hold up millions of tons of debris." She pointed to another vessel. "That's the Prometheus, a volcanic emergency response ship. It can operate in temperatures that would melt most metals and has atmospheric shields capable of withstanding ash, toxic gas, and extreme pressure variations." One by one, Geo identified the ships, ocean disaster responders that could function in the most violent storms, radiation containment vessels designed to manage nuclear accidents, planetary evacuation ships capable of housing and feeding tens of thousands, mining vessels with drilling equipment that could pierce the hardest known materials. "What you're looking at," Jiho concluded, "is the most experienced disaster response fleet in Earth's history. Every ship and crew has faced death countless times and prevailed. They don't run from catastrophe, they run toward it." An uncomfortable silence filled the room until Sub-Commander Lee spoke up. "Admiral, with respect, we face a military threat, not a natural disaster." "Are they?" Joe asked simply. She walked to the tactical display and studied the CAC's advance pattern. "They move like a natural force, predictable, relentless, without flexibility. They expect their opponents to either fight conventionally or flee. They've never encountered a species evolved to thrive in constant disaster." She turned to face the Marin officers. "On Earth, we face catastrophe every day. Our planet tries to kill us regularly. We've survived because we've learned to adapt, to use unexpected resources, to find solutions where none seemed possible." Commander June still looked unconvinced. "But without significant weapons." "We have some conventional armaments," Jiho interrupted, "but weapons aren't our primary strategy. The CACX expect a specific type of resistance. We're going to show them something they've never seen before." She activated her data pad, projecting a new tactical display. First, we'll deploy our mining vessels to create navigational hazards in these sectors. The CAAC rely on predetermined approach vectors, we'll force them to abandon those. Next, our research vessels will release atmospheric modification buoys near their fleet positions, creating sensor-disrupting storm conditions. As Jiho detailed more of the plan, the Marin officers began to see the unusual logic behind it. The human strategy focused not on directly engaging CAX warships, but on disrupting their operations while simultaneously extracting Moran civilians from threatened worlds. Most importantly, Jiho continued, we'll be deploying ground teams to occupied Moran planets to rescue your people right from under CX control. Our teams specialize in operating in the most hostile conditions imaginable. Commander Jun shook his head in disbelief. The CAX will simply shoot your rescue ships as they approach. Jiho's expression hardened slightly. Commander, on Earth we have a saying, the most dangerous person in any room is the one with nothing to lose and everything to protect. My rescue teams will reach your people. The CAX can try to stop them. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. A communications officer burst into the room. Commander, Krivak's advanced fleet detected approaching the Taylor colony. They've launched their first wave of attack ships. All eyes turned to Admiral Ju. Instead of concern, her expression showed focus and determination. Perfect timing, she said, activating her communication link. All ships, this is Admiral Ju. Deploy as planned. Rescue teams, prepare for drop operations. Taylor colony is our first target. She looked at the stunned Moran officers with a grim smile. The CAAC have never encountered a species evolved to thrive in constant disaster. They're about to learn why that's a mistake. As the human fleet began moving into formation, Commander Jun realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. Whether it would be enough to save his people remained to be seen, but for the first time in months, he felt something close to hope. The mining vessel Stalwart hung silently at the edge of the K-layer asteroid belt. Its captain, Sangman, watched as the massive CAX battle group approached from the direction of the recently fallen Moran colony. According to intelligence, they were headed for the next populated system, unless someone stopped them. All drilling teams in position. Sangman asked, his voice calm despite the danger. Yes, Captain, his first officer replied. 20 teams deployed across the belt. They're awaiting your command. Sangman nodded. The Stallard was a deep space mining vessel designed to extract rare minerals from the most hazardous environments. Its crew had faced collapsing mine shafts, explosive gas pockets, and crushing pressure. What they were about to attempt would draw on all that experience, just not for mining. Begin synchronized drilling pattern avalanche, Sangman ordered. Throughout the asteroid belt, human teams activated powerful drilling equipment. They weren't extracting ore, they were strategically weakening the structure of key asteroids. Minutes passed as the CX fleet continued its approach, unaware of the trap being laid. Structural integrity at critical levels across all target asteroids, reported the engineer. Ready for final phase. Sangman took a deep breath. Deploy seismic charges and withdraw all teams. Small devices attached to each weakened asteroid activated simultaneously. The charges weren't powerful enough to destroy the massive rocks, they didn't need to be. They simply provided the final push to start a chain reaction. The CRWX fleet entered the asteroid belt using their standard formation, a tight, efficient pattern that minimized their vulnerability to conventional attacks. As the first asteroids began to fragment, their sensors detected the movement, but calculated it as normal belt activity. They realized their mistake too late. The carefully engineered fragmentation spread rapidly, creating a chaotic debris field unlike anything their navigation systems had been programmed to handle. Smaller CX vessels took direct hits as chunks of rock shattered against their hulls. Larger ships were forced to break formation to avoid collision. "Captain," called the sensor operator aboard the Stallard. "The CRYX fleet is in complete disarray. Their tight formation has broken down. Several ships are reporting significant damage." Sangman allowed himself a small smile. "Send word to Admiral J. The K-layer belt is now a no-go zone for CAC ships. Phase 1 complete." Across the sector, other human vessels were implementing similarly unconventional tactics. The medical ship Macaulay approached a CX-occupied Moran world under the command of Captain Murray. Her ship was designed to respond to disease outbreaks and had the most advanced containment protocols in the human fleet. "They're hailing us," her communications officer reported. "They're demanding we identify ourselves or be destroyed." Murray nodded. "Send them our prepared response. Full quarantine protocols." The message sent to the CAC ships was accompanied by medical data, all of it factual but presented in a way to suggest a highly contagious pathogen had been detected on the planet below. The Nightingale began deploying atmosphere sampling probes and containment buoys around the planet. The CAX, like many species, had an instinctive fear of disease. Their highly structured military protocols included immediate withdrawal from any area with potential biological contamination. Within hours, their occupation forces began a hasty evacuation from the planet's surface. "Captain," the communications officer said with surprise, "the CAAC are pulling out. All of them. They're abandoning their ground positions." Miri watched the CAC ships retreat. "Begin medical relief operations immediately. I want teams on the ground before they realize there is no outbreak." But the most daring operations were happening on planets still under active CAX control. On the agricultural world of Sita, Commander Duan led a rescue team into the main population center. Unlike the Marin defenders who had retreated weeks ago, his team moved directly toward the heaviest concentration of CVAX forces. Duan and his team wore environmental protection suits designed for volcanic rescue operations. The suits could withstand extreme heat, toxic atmospheres, and significant physical impact, making them surprisingly effective as combat armor. They moved with practiced efficiency through the rubble-strewn streets. "Life signs detected in the collapsed community center," reported Junio, the team's sensor specialist. "At least 30 Marins trapped inside. KX patrol approaching from the east." Doan made an instant assessment. "Team 2, create a diversion to draw off that patrol. Team 1 with me, we're going in." The CAC soldiers were confused when half the human team deliberately revealed their position, making noise and movement that drew their attention. This violation of basic tactical doctrine, hiding from superior forces, made the CAC suspect a trap. They hesitated, then moved to engage. Meanwhile, Duan's group reached the collapsed building. The structure had been hit by CAAC artillery and was highly unstable. Any movement might bring down the remaining sections. Just like the Jakarta earthquake, Duan said to his team, "Stabilize the support columns first." The humans deployed portable gravity anchors, devices developed to hold up collapsing buildings during Earth's natural disasters. Working with practiced speed, they created a safe passage into the building's interior. A group of terrified Marin huddled in what had once been a basement. They stared in disbelief as the humans appeared. "We're from Earth," Doan said simply, kneeling beside a wounded Moran child. "We're here to get you out." "But the CAX are everywhere," whispered an elderly Moran. "No one can stand against them." Dohan smiled as he applied emergency medical treatment to the child. "On my world, we run into burning buildings to save strangers. The CAAC don't scare us." Outside, the situation had deteriorated. The CAX patrol had called for reinforcements, and heavy weapons fire now blocked the most direct escape route. "Command, we need extraction," Duan called over his communication link. 32 Moran civilians, multiple injuries. The response came immediately from the horizon, a disaster evacuation ship in orbit. Negative on standard extraction area. Too hot. Implementing protocol avalanche. Doan's expression changed to one of grim satisfaction. Everyone stay close, he told the Marin. This might seem scary, but we've done it before. The ground suddenly trembled as an object plummeted from the sky. A massive evacuation pod designed to be dropped directly into disaster zones, it smashed through the broken streets, absorbing the impact with advanced shock systems. Its sides unfolded to create a protected corridor leading directly to the building where Duan's team and the Marin waited. Go, go, go. Duan urged, helping the Marin into the corridor while his team provided covering fire. The CAAC commanders were stunned. Instead of retreating from their overwhelming firepower, the humans had dropped an extraction vessel directly into the hottest part of the combat zone. It violated every principle of tactical doctrine they understood. By the time they adjusted their strategy, the evacuation pod had retracted its corridor, sealed its hatches, and launched back toward orbit with rocket-assisted boosters, carrying all the Marin and rescue team to safety. Similar operations were happening across multiple planets. The CACS, accustomed to enemies who followed predictable patterns of engagement, found themselves unable to counter the human approach. How could they fight an enemy that didn't try to win battles, but simply ignored them to achieve their objectives? In the first week alone, Commander Du Hen's teams rescued over 8,000 Moran civilians from occupied territories. Their methods became legendary among both the grateful Marin and the increasingly frustrated CAC. As Admiral Zhou received the reports from across the sector, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. We don't need to destroy the CAAC fleet, she told her officers. We just need to show them that occupation costs more than they're willing to pay. Ambassador Tutwan stepped off the transport shuttle onto the muddy ground of Nova Agricola, the Marin Confederacy's primary agricultural world. Once lush with golden grain fields and processing centers, the planet now bore the scars of CAAC occupation. Burned fields stretched to the horizon, and the central processing facility had been reduced to twisted metal. 2 weeks earlier, human forces had pushed the CAAC from this world using their unconventional tactics. Now Talwan had come to witness the recovery efforts firsthand and to better understand these strange allies. Ambassador, welcome to Forward Base Horizon, said Colonel Swan, the human commander in charge of the operation. She stood straight despite obvious fatigue, her uniform stained with dirt and what appeared to be dried blood. I apologize for the conditions. We're still establishing proper facilities. Taiwan looked around at the human camp. Unlike the pristine Moran military bases he was accustomed to, this one buzzed with controlled chaos. Vehicles moved in all directions, teams loaded and unloaded supplies, and medical units treated both humans and Marin in hastily erected tents. No apologies needed, Colonel, Taiwan replied. What you've accomplished here is remarkable. The CAX held this world for almost a month. Our military advisors said reclaiming it would take at least 3 months of conventional warfare. Suman nodded, leading him through the camp. We didn't defeat them in the traditional sense. We simply made occupation too costly for them to maintain. At significant cost to your own people, Taiwan observed, noting the medical tent where injured humans were being treated. Suman's expression remained steady. We lost 17 rescue specialists in the operation. Each one is deeply mourned, but their sacrifice allowed us to save over 12,000 Moran civilians. Before Taiwan could respond, alarms blared throughout the camp. Personnel who had seemed tired moments before instantly snapped to alert readiness. CAAC aircraft approaching from the northeast, announced a voice over the communication system. Possible attack run on the Hallan settlement. All rescue teams deploy immediately. Suin turned to Dan. Would you like to observe our response, Ambassador? It might help you understand our methods better. Without waiting for an answer, she led him to a command vehicle where screens displayed the unfolding situation. A KRAX attack squad had returned to the planet, targeting a small Moran settlement that had thus far escaped the worst of the fighting. Team Epsilon is closest, reported an operations officer. Estimated arrival in 8 minutes. Too long, Swan replied. The CAX will have leveled half the settlement by then. We need faster response. A young human officer stepped forward. Ma'am, Team Delta just returned from the southern region. They've been in continuous operation for 36 hours and have 3 wounded members, but they're only 2 minutes out from Halavan. Taiwan expected the colonel to reject this option. In Mirant military doctrine, troops were never deployed immediately after sustained operations, especially not with wounded team members. Instead, Suin opened a communication channel. Delta Team, this is Colonel Swan. We have CAX forces attacking Halavan settlement. You're the closest response unit. Can you handle it? The response came immediately. Already moving, Colonel. We heard the alert. ETA 90 seconds. On the screens, Tawan watched as a human transport vehicle raced toward the settlement, where KRIAK ships had begun firing on civilian structures. The human vehicle wasn't a military transport, but a modified rescue craft designed for earthquake response. They're going directly into the attack zone, Todd Onion said, unable to hide his alarm. The CAX will target them immediately. Su Min nodded. That's counting on the CX following their standard protocol. Watch. The human vehicle entered the settlement at high speed, deploying countermeasures that created a smoke screen. The CAC ships, following their programmed response to unexpected resistance, formed a search pattern to locate and eliminate the threat. While the CRAX focused on finding the human vehicle, Team Delta had already begun evacuating Moran civilians from damaged buildings. They moved with practiced efficiency, using their rescue equipment to stabilize collapsing structures and extract trapped individuals. They're ignoring the CAC ships, Taiwan observed with amazement. Not ignoring, Suin corrected. Prioritizing. Their primary mission is civilian rescue, not engagement with enemy forces. As the operation continued, one of the CAC ships spotted the evacuation effort and directed its weapons at the humans. Direct hits damaged their equipment and injured 2 more team members. Taiwan tensed, expecting the humans to abort their mission. Instead, the team leader redirected his remaining personnel to continue the evacuation, while the wounded members provided medical assistance to injured Marans. Their pace, if anything, increased after taking casualties. I don't understand, Taiwan said quietly. In most species, taking casualties causes hesitation and retreat. Your people seem to become more determined. Suman's eyes remained fixed on the screens. It's a peculiarity of human psychology that developed on our world. When we see others in danger, something happens in our brains. We call it the rescue response. It can actually override our self-preservation instincts. After 20 intense minutes, Team Delta had evacuated all surviving Marans from the settlement. The CAC ships, confused by the humans' apparent disregard for their own safety, eventually withdrew rather than continue an engagement they couldn't predict. Later, Taiwan visited the medical tent where both Moran civilians and wounded humans were being treated.